Welcome to the Envelopes Emmy Contender Series. I'm Yvonne Villarreal. Each episode will talk with the actors behind some of your favorite TV performances this season. On today's episode, we're talking to Caitriona Balfe, who plays Claire Randall in the TV series Outlander. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We just had your co-star, Sam.
I don't want to talk about him.
Well, he told us that there's this riff going on, that we have to keep you guys apart.
You should ask him what he's done. Because, you know, he knows. He knows what he's done. Yeah.
You setting him straight?
Well, he just needs to be taught a lesson or two. You know, it's like when he decided to, he took all of my, we were given gifts. There was gifts sent to set. He took them all. And then he has spread a rumor that he makes homemade fudge when actually it was the lovely lady at a set who gave us both homemade fudge, and he took credit for that.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, he's on ice for a little minute.
All right. Yeah, he told us you guys have to CGI your scenes now.
Yeah.
Which is, you know.
Well, you know, I now act to a Post-it, which, you know, some days it's the same thing. No, I'm joking.
Well, you know, fans, like, this was like one of our most asked questions of why you guys are not doing this interview together. How have you settled into the fandom of Outlander 3 seasons and going into your 4th? They're very committed.
Great.
They're great.
Look, we're so lucky. We have this amazing fan base who are so committed, and they're so passionate about the show and the books, and you know, especially when there's an adaptation that happens. It's not always that people get on board with the new version of it, right? And we've been really lucky that the fans of the books predominantly have transferred their love over to the show, and they're, you know, they support, like Sam and I, we both work with charities, and they're so supportive of that, and all of that stuff is just amazing. And, you know, as with anything, there's a 0.001% who want to just ruin it for everybody. But, you know, we just let them do their thing and ignore it.
Yeah. Well, season 3, we see that Jamie and Claire are spending much of it apart, at least for the first half of the season. And it really gave your characters a chance to explore a life that's sort of compromised. This isn't happily ever after. We're just going with what we can right now. Talk about sort of living that life of it not being the ideal situation, but going through with it anyway.
Yeah, you know, for Claire, in the beginning of season 3, where we pick up is she's just arrived back through the Stones. We sort of pick up when her and Frank arrive in Boston. She's pregnant with Jamie's child, and for all intents and purposes, she is a woman going through grief because she thinks that Jamie has died at Culloden. And living with the memory of someone who's dead is very different than living with the memory or living with the notion that the person that you want to be with is somewhere else and living at the same time. So, you know, it was interesting to sort of work with that, and how does grief, how do you go through the stages of grief while at the same time having to, on the surface, get on board with this rekindling of a marriage in some ways. And for me, you know, the fact that Claire was pregnant and that she had this child that she was about to bring into the world, she had to make a success of her situation. And Frank, at this point, you know, everything he has done has been honorable up to this point. He has accepted her back. He has listened to her version of what has happened, and he may not like it or believe it, but he accepts it from her. But he asks that she put everything that happened to one side and never speak about it again. And so that's quite a difficult thing for Claire to do, but in many ways that's how she copes with it. She has to just put that whole part of herself to one side. But you know, it was really interesting, and it was a really great challenge to go through the different phases of her life. We had 3 episodes to kind of span 20 years, which is not a lot. So you're trying to find a way to make that a fully formed story within these little vignettes or whatever you get to play it. And, you know, Tobias and I talked a lot about not making Claire and Frank just one note that this is a terrible relationship, and, you know, because otherwise that's I don't think, I think both of those characters are better than that to stay in something if it was just terrible. And so we worked with trying to find, well, where's the moments that they coexist in a cohesive way, and what works in that relationship, and what where does the light shine? And it's Brianna, definitely, but it's also, it's her trying to find the good in her life and trying to make it successful, even though she has lost something that's so huge for her.
Was there anything from the books that didn't make it in that sort of helped you understand or get to know her in this 20-year period?
Of course. I mean, there's some scenes that I was like devastated we didn't get to shoot. There's the scene where she's working all day and Brianna gets hurt, and she has to run home, and she has all of that guilt and all of that, it's so interesting to see a working mom in that kind of late 50s, early 60s time. And I was like, what do you mean we're not filming that? That's so important to this character. But, time we don't have time to shoot everything. But I have that, and you bring that into your performance throughout the rest of the scenes. But, it was also having all of that stuff, especially when we got to episode like 3, 4, and 5, you want to show that the character is wearing all of those experiences, and that having lived 20 years without having passion, without having intimacy, those things, even though she managed to be successful professionally and as a mother, it changes who you are, and I wanted to show a Claire that's more reserved and more, that she sort of lost that spark and that freedom and that feistiness that we know of her from before. And then when, she's reunited with Jamie and going forward, you want to sort of bring that back in.
What, we see that, she gets into medicine as sort of her way to function through all of this. Like, I need something to grasp on. What was it like sort of watching her come into that? And, you talked about being a mother in the 40s, 50s, 60s, just being a woman in general during that time. We see what she faces in terms of that. Like, talk a little bit about being in that mindset.
Yeah, we're at such a time right now when we're still battling for equality, and we're still battling for respect as women. But looking back at that time, and you see how people would shut any woman down with an opinion, or that we had that great scene in the university with Frank, and Claire's supposed to play this doting wife role, and God forbid that she might have an opinion about politics or anything like that, or that she might even read a newspaper, and it's interesting because obviously, you look at, or I look at my mother and my grandmother, and you start thinking about all of the things that they've gone through in their lives, and it makes you understand more how they've become the women that they are, and the things that they've had to go through. And, it was important for me that Claire, I've always said that she's timeless, right? And that even when she was back in the 18th century, that, no matter where she would be, she would always speak up, and she would always try and find a way to be in her authentic self. And so it was nice to bring her back into her future, or her present, and watch that she's still that, it's
pushing
not
against it.
Yeah, that she's still pushing against it, and it's not that she was just a woman from the 40s back in the 18th century, and that's why she was able to speak up. No, because she's experiencing very similar things in that time too. So that this is just her character, that no matter when you put her in or what time you put her in, that she will always try and buck that patriarchy, and she will always try and fight for injustice.
Did you have a favorite era in this somewhat present time, the 40s, 50s, or 60s?
I definitely, I love the 40s. I love all of that kind of, you know, the costuming and stuff like that, and the 60s as well. The 50s I could probably leave. It just got a little funky then. But yeah, and the 60s, you know, for me playing Claire, I loved that probably the most, because I feel terrible fit of giggles to the point where I was actually crying tears. And the whole crew then just lost it, and we all just kind of, yeah, it was really funny. But then it was, you know, we got everyone together and we tricked him, and he got called into the other set, and he was very embarrassed because he was standing in his pajamas, and everyone else was like, "Hey, goodbye."
I want my last day to be in my pajamas wherever it's at. But let's take some social media questions. Fan from Twitter asked, "Is it more challenge?" Okay, well, so before we get into this question, in this season, you shoot with a new scene partner, which is Scar the Snake.
Yes.
How was that?
That was great.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd never handled a snake before. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it. But I always have this thing: if it's on set, he's going to be fine, right? Like if I'm walking through a jungle and I meet a snake, I'm not going to have the same feeling. But somebody's brought it into an office. It's bound to be a pet. It's probably been fed. We're probably good.
You hope, but they make you sign that insurance form, so you never know.
Actually, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that. But yeah, so I met him in the office, and it was kind of cool. I was like, "Woo, this is fun." But when we did the scene, like one of the first takes, because I have my skirt wrapped around me, it just went for the, you know, the nearest dark pocket, and it just went there. And I was not so comfortable with this anymore. Maybe we just take it out. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, the person on Twitter is asking, is it more challenging to shoot with animals or babies?
Animals. The babies are so cute, and we've had so many babies on the last 2 seasons as well. You know, and we generally get twins, so if one cries, they sort of shove another one in, so that's fine. The animals, and we have a dog this season in season 4, and let me tell you, there's a reason they say never work with animals.
Another fan asked, I mean, this sort of plays off the question I asked you earlier, but is there any part of the book that didn't make it into season 3 that you wish could have been included? Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of Claire's journey prior to going back that, you know, it's more of her story, and they wanted to do both, and obviously she's my character, so you know, there's a lot of that stuff that I loved. But there's always stuff, and even later on, we changed quite a lot of the John Gray stuff, and in the books I had loved when they met on the boat, and that changed a lot of what happened when they met in Jamaica, and it's very different, and yeah, we did change quite a few things that we were like, what, why? I liked it in the book where Claire found out about Willie later. Personally, but
well, a big part for Claire in season 3 is deciding to leave her daughter. Talk a little bit about how you perceive that decision of, you know.
I think that was one of the hardest things to wrap my head around, and yeah, how do you? It is a death, and you know, Tony Graffia wrote this great, like the great scenes around that where, you know, Claire does explain to Brianna, like, this is not like you can just jump on and off an elevator. Like I may not even survive going through, let alone ever be able to come back. And so effectively you know, it's like you're saying goodbye forever.
Yeah.
And that was a really hard thing to wrap my head around, but I always try and find situations in real life where you can connect to, and my dad's aunts, you know, in Ireland, I come from a country where there's a lot of immigration, or there has been a lot of immigration historically, and so 3 of my dad's aunts immigrated, and they never saw the rest of their families ever again. One went to Canada, and 2 went to Canada, 1 went to India, and so I had to sort of go back and think, well, in the 60s, you're not that far from the 40s or the 30s when people would immigrate, and that would be it. So, you know, we're so used to picking up a phone and being able to talk to people or FaceTime or whatever it is, that, you know, you have to put back in the mentality of the 60s. It was probably not that uncommon for a child to leave, and, you know, you may not see them again. You would still get letters, but so in that way I was like, okay, well, there's a precedent there that can sort of make it okay. But then it was, you know, obviously the main thing was Brianna giving permission, or Brianna actually saying, you have to do this. But yeah, it's a hard thing. I think I'm not a mother, but I think anyone who is a mother or father, you know, to choose a love over your child, that's a big ask. Yes. And yeah, it was tough.
Well, out of it, not that this is the bright side, but out of it came the Batgirl costume.
The bat suit.
The bat suit, sorry. Talk about, I mean, that was like one of the best ensembles. It had pockets and zippers, which people didn't know what to make with.
All of Claire's costumes pretty much have pockets. It's one of my stipulations. I love a pocket, and I'm like, she's from the 40s, you know, when she first went back, she would want a pocket in there. Yeah, you know, that costume, I think it was probably one of the most difficult ones for Terry to design, because it had to do so much.
Yeah.
And you know, we got to the first day and we went out and filmed, and it was freezing and it started raining, and we didn't have the cloak at that point, and it didn't really protect, and they were like, we need to do something. And so right away, overnight, they made that cloak. And you know, what I liked about it was that, I mean, when we first looked at it, we were like, it's a little like a prison marm. You know, are we sure this is what she wants to go back in? It's not exactly a first date outfit, you know. But it spoke to, I think there's a rigidity to Claire that existed because she was so kind of, you know, reserved, and she had lost so much of herself, and she'd built all these protections around her heart, and there were walls up, and that spoke to all of that. And then as she goes back and meets Jamie, it's almost like you can peel away layers like an onion, and we did that, and I was very happy to say goodbye to some of them. But you know, once we get on the ships and we head towards the New World and to Jamaica, you know, you just see her settle into this world, and it's like all of those barriers and protections that she had built up, they just ease away, and it's nice that that's also replicated in the costume, and I love where we got to in the end. You know, it's almost like Katharine Hepburn in African Queen. It was just a great silhouette and great look, and Claire at that point is just very much she's whole again, and I liked that you just see that in her. It just looks so effortless and free. So
how was it shooting on the ship?
It was really interesting, obviously very different from anything we'd done before, and then it gets very restrictive because even though these ships are, you know, they're not quite life-size, but they're massive, and you know, the sets in South Africa were amazing, but you know, they're quite cramped when you're down below deck. Well, it's also the ceilings are quite low, and we had David Moore was our director for those 2 episodes, and just every 5 to 10 minutes you'd hear, and he'd have bashed his head off something else, and just, we had one of our cameramen from South Africa, this great guy, Lars. Lars is about 6'4", and so he was constantly bashing his head off things, and then when you add in the gimbal, it's definitely, you start to get a little seasick. But all of the scenes that we filmed, and they were the sort of the first ones up, were the typhoid epidemic, and we were doing all the stuff below deck. And they had used this mixture, so it's paps, I think is what it's called. It's like kind of like a porridge, and you can mix it with water or milk.
Okay.
And they chose to mix it with milk, and they made it on a Friday, and we were shooting on Monday.
That smelled.
Oh my, like there's a scene where myself and one of the other characters are coming down the steps, and we walk into this space and Claire's like that, and it was like hitting a wall of putrid, just it was nasty, and it stayed on those costumes for about 3 or 4 days. I mean, those poor essays, the extras, it was horrible.
Well, it must have made being on a ship with all those men a little easier to bear, because you would think that would be smelly. But it was
it would mask any man smell for a good week or two. It was intense.
How about like the running through the jungle parts for you?
You know, all of that stuff was really fun, but it was also, you know, we're in South Africa, so, you know, our greens department created this amazing jungle, but it wasn't that big. So some of it we did.
Running in circles?
Sometimes, yeah. But it was probably, you know, I don't know, like 25 meters by 10 meters maybe. But you would actually get lost in it, like, you know, so you would hear the crew somewhere and you'd be like, which way are we going? It's just, you'd sort of pop out on one end and you're like, I don't know how to get way back to over there. But I liked all of that stuff where Claire's shipwrecked. It was, you know, that's, again, those are fun challenges, and, you know, trying to map, well, how does it feel to be 2 days into dehydration and what happens to you? And, you know, it's a lot of weird research where I was reading so many just accounts of people who'd been stranded in deserts, or, you know, you hear of people who drive into the middle of nowhere and their car breaks down and they go on wandering, and you're just like, first of all, why would you leave the car? Stay with your phone.
Yes.
But yeah, it was a lot of reading about that, and just about the disorientation, and that the dehydration is the worst thing that happens, and you know, it was hot and.
Was there a lot of downtime? I mean, this was like your first time shooting in South Africa, right? Like,
I had zero downtime.
No downtime.
Mr. Hewen, on the other hand, this is where it all began.
This is where it all starts. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was when I'd be working and he would keep sending me pictures of like his great lunches that he's having, or him on top of Table Mountain, or, you know, working out in the gym again. Yeah.
Damn him.
I know.
Let's ask him some more fan questions. Diana from Twitter asks, if you could bring any actor onto Outlander, who would it be?
Ooh. I mean, so many. Could we get Jenna Rollins in?
Ooh, nice.
I don't know what she'd do, but we're in America now.
Yeah.
Possible, right?
Possible. Vanessa from Twitter asks, would you ever want to direct an episode?
I would love to direct. I think the longer I'm on the show, people have asked me this before, and I'm like, it's such a beast, our show. I don't think I would. But, you know, if we go a few more seasons, the longer you're on it, the more you can kind of see, oh, I think I could figure this out. And, you know, it's such an amazing crew. I would just rely on them, basically. I would just be like, do what you normally do. But yeah, I think I would like to, actually.
A fan from Twitter asked, and they asked this of Sam too, if you could send the Frasers anywhere in the world for their honeymoon, where would it be?
Hawaii. Yeah, well, let's go to Hawaii. I mean, we call Fraser's Ridge Fraser's Fridge because it's in this forest and it's in a depression that sort of stays about 4 or 5 degrees colder than anywhere else around us. So, yeah. The Frasers of Fraser's Fridge.
He said an igloo, so. Gretchen from Twitter asked, which person from history would you like to see your character encounter in colonial America?
I'm kind of ignorant about colonial American history. Who would she be? I don't know.
Leave it up in there.
Yeah.
People. Season 3, we see after Jamie and Claire are reunited, we see them sort of settle into married life, which was different. How was that for you, exploring that side?
It's really nice. You know, I think when you're on a show for a long time, you want to try out new things, and you know, usually people want excitement, right? Because usually the norm is more quiet and subdued. But in the respect to Claire and Jamie, excitement is their norm. So it's actually nice to see them be able to enjoy each other without all of these external forces kind of trying to pull them apart. Or and going into season 4, we see much more of that, and it's nice to explore. Well, how do they relate on a day-to-day, you know? Who takes out the garbage? Like, no, but there's something beautiful.
Yeah,
there's something beautiful in just watching them enjoy being with each other, and that kind of domestic bliss. I think that's a really nice thing to be able to explore.
You talked before about how Joan Didion's books like Blue Night and A Year of Magical Thinking helped you in past. Were there any books that sort of helped you during this season?
Well, again, like at the beginning of this season, there was so much about grief again, and I definitely, you know, I sort of went back to A Year of Magical Thinking, but I'm trying to think what else I was reading to help. I mean, the stuff going to Jamaica and all of that, it's so kind of crazy and out there. I mean, Diane, like I go back to the book to Voyager so much, but I can't. You know, I can't even remember. I can't remember. I know some of the books I was reading in South Africa had nothing to do with the show, or they couldn't have helped me, but I can't think right now. Sorry.
Well, your character provided one of the rare moments of comedy on a show like this, which was talking to a coconut, which was not in the book.
I thought you were going to talk about my drunk acting. That was comedic enough.
We could talk about that too, but did you get very method talking to this coconut?
God. I mean, some days you're like, you want me to do what? Okay. I was channeling Tom Hanks for sure. I was like, right, if Tom can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, exactly.
It was very funny, and actually, Father Fogden, just an incredible character, and so wonderfully played. And I'm terrible because I'm spacing on the actor's name right now. But you can look it up on IMDb. But he was fantastic, and it was just such a funny, wacky part of the book, and all of those scenes with Father Fogden and Mamacita, they were really, it was so out there. But then also James, he played it with, there was this undercurrent of such heartbreak, and so it was this beautiful sort of, I think Claire feels so much for this man because she can understand what it is to lose somebody, and hear somebody who wasn't able to move past that. They sort of got lost in that loss. But yeah, talking to a coconut, we'll just put it up there on things I've done on Outlander.
Well, it's also not lose sight of, Claire has killed a lot of people on this show.
I don't know why everyone wants to bring that up. I don't know what you're talking about.
Do you view her as this killer, or like how do you?
I mean, it is kind of a running joke. I'm like, they're being added up as we go along. And this is the other thing, in the book, she doesn't kill the guy.
Okay.
I think it's Willoughby who ends up killing him. And I did question. I was like, are you sure? She's just got back. Do we want to make her an agent of chaos already?
But she did it with good intentions sometimes.
Well, she was defending herself, and then, you know,
she was trying to relieve the blood clot at one point.
Look, she drilled through his skull, and some days that works, and some days it doesn't. Yes, so, exactly. You know, don't try it at home. But
good disclaimer. Let's get to one more fan question, then we'll do the lightning round. So prepare yourself for the lightning round. Deborah from Facebook asked, what were the best and worst parts of the costumes for Season 3 and the upcoming Season 4?
Best part about costumes of Season 3 was all the amazing vintage stuff I got to wear. I remember going into Terry's office at the beginning of the season, and it was like being in the most incredible vintage store. And she definitely owes me. I was promised so many things were going to fall off the back of the truck and land in my possession, but that hasn't happened yet. The worst thing was, as much as we all love the batsuit, it was the only costume I had for
a while.
About 6 months, 7 months, and we all sort of wanted to burn it by the end of it. And I was also promised I would get to do that. But so far, there has not been a ritualistic burning.
Interesting. So. How about the costumes for season 4? What can you tell us?
I get new ones. So be rest assured, we're not still in the bat suit.
Okay.
You know, we have a great co-designer, Nina, and I've been working with Nina and Terry's assistant, Basha, at the moment. And we're the Fraser's Ridge stuff. We have great stuff before that, but where we get to at the moment, I'm loving it so much. It's sort of a real, it really speaks to Claire's character, but it also, it's like Claire, the frontierswoman, woman, and I love it. It's just, the stuff looks great, and you know when you've got a cool costume on when the guys on the crew are like, hey, that's a cool outfit, and you're like, thanks, Grip, thank you.
Don't try any funny stuff. Okay, lightning round. Ready. Last show you binge watched?
Wormwood.
If you could go back and be on any TV show ever, what would it be?
Roseanne.
Nice. TV is often like a place where people go to unwind or relax from their hectic day. What do you do to unwind?
I hate to admit this, but my total guilty pleasure is Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and I'm so sorry.
Yes! Oh my God.
I'm ashamed to admit it, but I love it.
We're going to talk about this after the camera stop.
Okay.
What do you know now that you wish you knew on your first acting job?
Everything. What a mark is, where the camera is. No.
Have you ever been fired from an acting job?
No.
Good.
There's time yet.
Which Golden Girls character do you most identify with? Dorothy,
Ooh.
Rose, Blanche,
Oh,
Sophia?
no, I know them all. Don't
okay.
worry. I'm well, I love those. I probably would like to think that I probably vacillate more between Dorothy and Rose. But I think I'd like to think that I'm B. Or, no, I'm just saying I know them all. Blanche, thank you. I'd like to think I'm Blanche, but I'm probably more the other two.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks for watching, guys. If you want to check out more of our Emmy contender chats, head over to latimes.com. Thanks.